The boy claimed that his name was James in his past life, and he had flown off a ship called the Natoma. And later on, his parents found this aircraft carrier called the USS Natoma Bay. And in its squadron, there was a pilot named James Houston, who was killed in action.
Wow. That's all those connections. It's too coincidental to not have any significance. Hi everyone, my name is Bianca, energy healer and astrology enthusiast.
And I'm Ruth, mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness.
We've come together to create a safe space where we talk about all things to do with spirituality, mysticism, mind and wellness, and working with energy. The title of this episode is The Eternal You on the Boundless Sands of Time. We'll be focusing on reincarnation and rebirth.
Before we get into this topic, I'm sure people will want to know where we individually stand here, because that will potentially support and steer the discussion. Even so, our aim is to equally be broad and encompass a wide range of ideas as well. That said, Bianca, what are your personal views on reincarnation or rebirth?
Well, my views are very simple. I believe that we have an eternal soul. The purpose of our earthly life is to gain experience and grow and expand our levels of consciousness. When we die, we map out what our next earthly experience is going to be, and then we continue on until we've experienced all that there is to experience, basically.
Which is going to be endless.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I like that. I like that belief of having an eternal soul.
Yeah. That
really aligns for me, that the personality and the stories that we have here, those are temporary, but there's definitely an eternal aspect of us. So the way the language that I use around that is that we have an eternal essence to us.
I like that.
Yeah, you could call it essential energy. And what is often said is that if there is a part of you that is perishable, what does the perishable part matter anyway? It's the eternal part that matters. So besides that, everything else is up for debate, because it gets very complicated in a lot of different belief systems, and they all have their opinions and theories and argue about it. I have heard that the ego, or the dark part of us, is not eternal, which is very good news, because that's probably the part of us that we don't really want for the long term. And we see a lot of very dark things going on in the world that we can, through this framework, we can attribute that to the ego. So knowing that that part is not going to last, it's not going to repeat indefinitely, can give us hope.
Yeah.
In some traditions and some ideas, there's this thought that the ego, it can dissolve, but it can only dissolve through effort. So it will be here on repeat in a variety of ways until the consciousness wakes up and realizes what is going on. And in this theory, the essence or the eternal part of you, some of it is bottled up inside the ego. And the ego is running the show, using your eternal energy for these for the purposes that are just playing out automatically according to the patterns of the ego. So in this theory, a long, long time ago, we were pure and unconditioned consciousness. Because we were unconditioned, we could go any way. There was no predisposition to go towards the light or towards the darkness or to do good or bad. It was just there's an open space and you can travel in any direction you want. So some energy went left and some went right, and we didn't have the knowledge that we needed to work out which way to go. So some of us, through not knowing the rules of the game, went down a particular path where our energy became more and more ingrained, following certain patterns. And that is what in Buddhist philosophy they term ignorant action. So being ignorant means you don't know what is going to happen due to the rules of cause and effect, because you haven't worked out those laws. So when they start to play out, you entrain your energy to follow certain patterns.
What about the others? Because you said one way went down this path and then others went a different way.
Yes. So the idea that I'm exploring is a framework that discusses the path that we are on.
Mm-hmm.
And there doesn't seem to be a lot of commentary on the other path because we're not there. But Ram Dass makes some very good comments about it that help me to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So what he says is that essentially you are God, or you are this eternal energy, and you are playing in the realms of different possibilities, because what else would you do? There's nothing else to do. There's nowhere to go. There's only the eternal now. So you, or those of us who are in this realm, we are playing with what we can create in darkness. And equally, there are other essences or other energies that are playing in the realm of light, and they are creating in light. And when you stand back far enough, there's no good or bad. There is just what we are using to create.
Yeah.
So those of us here are creating by hiding light in darkness, and that's how we've made matter. And that's why you hear scientists saying that actually now we've discovered that we're not made up of just atoms. There's actually dark matter. There are other energies that underpin this reality that we are experiencing. So we are the essences that are playing on this side of the coin. And then the other side, there are those pure light beings that are playing in pure light and purity. So that's just a philosophy. That's
very interesting.
Yeah. So coming back to the ideas on ignorance, this idea says that ignorant action is any action that causes harm to us and others. And in the beginning of when we began to create in this realm, we were ignorant. So we took certain actions that would kickstart the process or the wheel of karma, the cause and effect, because that is how this whole realm exists in the first place. So on one hand, you have these religions saying that karma is bad, but if you took away all the karma, this whole realm wouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So they're judging it and saying it's bad, but you could also say we're just playing with possibilities in this realm. So having ignorant action means that you have certain desires, whether craving or aversion. So really wanting something or really not wanting something. And those sentiments drive you to do certain things. And it's highly likely that when you're driven to get a desire, like a child wants to eat, the child doesn't think, oh, my mom is tired.
Yeah.
They don't think, oh, I should let her sleep.
Yeah.
So by being driven to fulfill that desire, we unknowingly create harm. It's very innocent, but it just happens. And
But then it's like harm to who?
Well, so that was my example where the child who wants food and screams for it, now the mother is tired and thirsty.
It's the mother that is perceiving this as harm.
Yes.
Because she's tired to cook. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, so
but then it's harm as in, but it's not harming the bystander who has no stake in the game.
No,
So
no.
it's very perceptive as to who's harm, who is, you know what I mean? Like, who is dictating that this is harm or not harm. Like, it's through the eyes of the mum it's harmful, but like you said, it's innocent because it's through the eyes of the child.
Yes, yes. So there's two parts to it. There's when you are in ignorance, you are motivated by desire and you take certain actions, and the ignorance means that you don't know who's being impacted. So in this example that I mentioned, the mum is being impacted in a particular way, but of course every action we take has certain impacts.
Yeah, cause and effect.
Yeah. Another example is I'm hungry, so I buy a packet of pasta. I open the packet, I cook it, I feed my children. It seems innocent. Then I put it in the rubbish, and because it's not recycled and we don't have a good method for disposing of it, it gets on-sold to another country that says they are going to dispose of it, and then they dump it in the ocean. And then it ends up harming animals in the sea. And when I go and eat some fish, maybe if I eat fish and that fish has microplastics in its belly, that harm comes back to me. And it's such a complex web that I don't even know how it came back to me. So I'm not saying that now we should all follow the law of karma or cause and effect, but I'm just explaining how this framework works. And if we carry on with this idea, then over time this free essence became trapped in these energetic patterns. And we, those who were learning to create in this realm, because we didn't really know what we were doing, then we all got very, very locked into this plane, this dense plane here. Whereas other multidimensional beings can come and go. They didn't get stuck because they were doing something different. They made different choices, and they have more ability to navigate across different dimensions.
Yeah.
So if we want to get out of this realm, then we have to learn how to be more fluid. And that's why in Buddhism they talk about the middle path. And it's not to say don't have any desires, but if you can learn to manage it and balance your craving and aversion, then you're free to decide to bring your consciousness into other states.
Yep.
But without that, your consciousness is stuck here. So depending on your level of vibration or your level of being, that will be the key to whether you can ascend or whether you descend. So you continue into denser and denser matter, denser energetic patterns. So that theory allows for a kind of rebirth, but it's the ego that is being reborn. And I'm very interested in this theory, but I'm not saying that I've entirely embraced it or adopted it. I call myself a student, a mystery student towards the awakening of consciousness, and that means that I'm looking at all these different ideas and playing with them and seeing how does it relate to me. And I don't think you can really very affirmatively tell people that it is one way or another unless you've had a deep personal experience. Even then, I still think it's up to everyone to find these things for themselves.
Exactly.
Have you ever heard of, or okay, I know you've heard of past life regression, but have you ever tried any of those therapy sessions?
No, I haven't tried it.
Right. I would be very keen to try some more. I have tried some that were not successful.
Oh, okay. How was the experience overall?
Yeah,
like, obviously you're thinking it wasn't successful, but was there anything that you could take away from it on a smaller scale?
Well, the experience that I had, I did not think it was a very good hypnotherapist.
Okay.
And I think he also sensed that he'd had some training And I couldn't tell if it was just that his method wasn't right for me, or if I was sitting there in the chair in the therapy room judging him and going, this is a bad therapy session.
How long did it last? Was it an hour?
It was an hour, which to me is not long. It's hardly long enough.
So I know of somebody in the US that does it, and she comes highly recommended by someone that I'm learning astrology off, and he did it and he got really good results from it. And when I went to go look her up, well, she was so expensive, but it was a 2 to 3 hour session. It's like $650 US.
Wow.
And I was like,
I don't know if I need to know that my past life that much, because I'm here now.
But I think if the desire was strong enough, then I would make a way for myself to go and have that experience. It's just not that strong in me to want to do that, just based off my understanding of where I'm at and the benefits that others have received, or that the reasons why they've sought out past life regression sessions. And it's been quite revolutionary for them in their individual life journey, but for me, I'm not yet at that point where I think I need it per se.
Yes.
But each to their own, and it can help. Like, it really can, if that's what you're, if learning about where you came from in past lives is going to help you gain insight as to why you're here, or the lessons that you need to learn here, or what you've brought from that life into this life, then by all means, you can't put a price on something that's going to help you grow and evolve.
Absolutely. From what I've heard with past life regression, it is really helpful for people with chronic pains that they've had since they were born, because a lot of people who do past life regression find that the pain that they're experiencing is connected to how they died, and as soon as they understand it, the pain disappears.
Yeah, I've heard also that physical markings on your body, like birthmarks, can give you an idea as to how you may have passed away, or the injuries that you may have experienced or obtained, like injuries that you may have sustained while in a previous life, you bring it into this life. So that's just one concept that I've heard. Like if you have like a birthmark on, on your arm or something, maybe like you're shot with an arrow or something. I don't know.
That's in a lot of cultures,
really?
About birthmarks. Yes.
Yeah.
And one story in particular was someone who had pains around the liver area. When they did the past life regression, they saw that was where they were stabbed. And just by reliving those memories, however painful, when they came back to this present moment, the pain disappeared. So to me, that's very helpful. And that includes people who have a phobia of water and found they died by drowning, and so on. So that is very helpful. And again, I'm the same as you. I just never... I was curious, so I paid $150 for that session that was not successful. And the therapist decided to refund me my money because I wasn't successful at having any past life regression, which I thought was amazing of him, because a lot of them advertise, it's not my fault if you don't see your past life, I'm still taking your money. And I think, it kind of is, because you're the one that's offering the bridge to those past memories for the person who can't access them.
And there's another thing that I also just wanted to share briefly while we're touching on this topic of past life regression, is that we as humans, when we reincarnate into this lifetime, we have this inflated sense of self that, I was Cleopatra in a past life, or, but 9 times out of 10, you're probably just like a peasant somewhere in like 1800s, and died of like typhoid or something.
Yeah.
Living off potatoes that you
Yes.
harvested yourself, and
That's right.
you know, like you may not have come from such grandeur that you think you may have, and that can be really humbling for some people to discover, and just bring them down a notch on
Yes.
on their
That's right.
high horse.
when you hear these people saying, I'm Jesus reincarnated, I'm Muhammad, I'm Cleopatra, or whatever famous personage from history, I would be very weary of them because, well, there was one Cleopatra, so you can't all be her. And the other part to it is that the ego can so easily latch on to, you know, what if they were accessing the collective consciousness? So then they can go into any memory, and then their ego goes, well, surely I was the whatever, Alexander the Great, and goes to one of the most famous personages and says, that was me. So that's something to be mindful of. If we look at this theory that I had mentioned previously, the thing is that we keep coming back to the earth realm, and this is instead of going to higher realms that could be more blissful. So that means that something in the energies that we've been working with have magnetized us to this realm. And that's why the theory says that it's the ego that keeps coming back. But if the ego were 100% separate to us, that wouldn't make sense. And that's why the theory says, well, there's your eternal essence is trapped inside the ego. And when you find out how to release it from the ego, then you're free to go up or down or left or right or wherever you want to go. So those very high and enlightened saints that you hear about from Tibet or India, they're the ones that can actually choose whether or not to be reincarnated on Earth. And usually if they do come back, they come back because they have more work to do here. They want to spread their message of love and enlightenment, but equally they can choose not to come back. So you often hear the disciples of a grand master asking him what's next. And if he's finished his work here, he's basically saying, I'm going on to the higher realms. And for those who can access all the realms, this realm is just, it's so low for them that it's a great act of love and sacrifice to come back here. 9 out of 10, they don't want to do it. They're just saying, I've done all my work and I'm going up and out of here. So that's the theory.
Wow. And so it makes me curious to, because I know you mentioned just a little bit about some of the different theories out there, but what makes you lean towards considering reincarnation as a possibility? Like, was there anything specific that you heard about or that happened personally that led you towards that view, if you were to lean towards reincarnation, you know?
Yes, I do lean that way these days, though growing up as a Christian, certainly we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big no, because it didn't align with our belief system. You believe in God and Jesus, and then you die and go to heaven. So who's reincarnating? Otherwise you go to hell. So it didn't really make sense. And besides some particular research that led me to believe that, one interesting thing that I came across in the Bible itself, it does mention reincarnation. And that's where the disciples of Jesus ask him, was this man born a cripple due to his sins or the sins of his parents? And I think that should be an obvious sign to Christians, but because it doesn't fit with their belief system, they don't drill down on that point. But there's no way that he could have been born crippled due to his past sins unless he had a previous life.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so it's right there. There's a lot of evidence out there, but people don't want to look at it because they've limited themselves. They've confine themselves to one way of thinking. So if we shift the dial slightly, then we can learn and discover a new way of looking at the world, and that can free us from living so densely, maybe inviting a more magical outlook. Now, there was a child psychiatrist, Professor Jim Tucker, and he was in private practice when he began to look into reincarnation research. And this research was being carried out by Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was the founder and director of the Division of Perceptual Studies at UVA. So this doctor, he spiked Tucker's interest, and Tucker joined the division in 1996 when Stevenson retired. He joined the division, and then fast forward 6 years, when Stevenson retired, Tucker took over the division.
Okay.
So then he became the leader and was carrying out this past life research. What they were doing with their research was they were documenting cases of children from all over the world who had memories of former lives. And it's all fine and good for a child to claim to have a memory from a former life. But it's when they know things that there is no other way for them to know, that's when what they're presenting with starts to become, you could say, evidence. There was, one of the cases was a toddler in California who had an amazing golf swing. Very, very unusual.
With a good golf swing. Wow. I'd like to see a toddler hold up a golf.
I know. And the toddler said himself that he used to be Bobby Jones.
Oh.
So I don't know what kind of twisted parent would teach their child to do something like that.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that it was that it was Bobby Jones. Mm-hmm. There was another 5-year-old who had memories and physical traits that were exactly the same as his brother who died a long time ago. That include blindness in the left eye, a mark on his neck, and a limp, exactly the same. And you could say, oh, well, they're brothers, so they have the same traits. It's not common to have a mark in the same place. Mm. But shared memories, that's next level.
Yeah.
There was also a girl in India who woke up one day and began speaking in a dialect that she'd never heard or learned before. So these are just a few snippets of many, many stories. They studied 2,500 children from all over the world.
Wow.
And you can read about this in Tucker's book, Return to Life, Extraordinary Cases of Children Who Remember Their Past Lives. Now, maybe not everyone has time to read the book, but there's been some TV coverage of it as well. Mm-hmm. In 2002, Tucker was involved with some TV producers, and they wanted to air this program. I don't know why it didn't get aired, but they worked on it, so it's known that they worked on this program where there was a 4-year-old boy from Louisiana who believed he was shot down in World War II. And it was his parents realized that he had these memories because he used to have nightmares as a little 2-year-old toddler. And he would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, plane on fire, airplane crash, little man can't get out. And you could say, okay, well, maybe they showed him some World War II movies. But he also knew some very specific details about planes that even his parents didn't know. So he was with his parents, and they were looking at the bottom of a toy plane, and his parents had told him, oh, there's the bomb. And he said, no, that's the drop tank. And then he was watching TV with his parents, and the History Channel came on, and the show host said, here's a Japanese plane, it's a Zero. And the little boy said, "No, that's not a 0, it's a Tony." So
Wow.
he had this knowledge
A
that,
little expert.
yeah, there was no other way to explain it otherwise. The boy claimed that his name was James in his past life, and he had flown off a ship called the Natoma. And later on, his parents found this aircraft carrier called the USS Natoma Bay. And in its squadron, there was a pilot named James Houston, who was killed in action.
Wow. That's all those connections. It's too coincidental to not have any significance.
Yes, and it definitely didn't come from his parents, because they were desperate to help their little boy with his nightmares. And the way that all this information came out was when the mother tried to get in touch with a therapist to help her toddler, and the therapist told her that you should probably talk to him and find out more information, and not dismiss him and shut him down. And that was when all this information came out. So his parents actually co-authored a book together called Soul Survivor, and that was published in 2009, where they detailed all of this journey, their family's journey. So the information that James was able to produce, it was just so striking, and the facts were so apparent that this is a case that's very hard to challenge, and it's only one of thousands and thousands of cases. And some people will say to the parents of this little boy, "Oh, you trained him to do that." And his dad just laughed and said, "You try telling a 2-year-old what to believe. You can't give them a script and tell them to memorize it."
Exactly. I feel like when I was just listening to that story, it reminds me of something that I mentioned in one of our previous episodes on paranormal activity and psychic abilities in children. Well, I think I only spent a few minutes talking about it, but I remember it took me back to how I was saying that children, especially under the age of 7, the younger, the more stronger these memories that they bring in from past lives are, and just how real those experiences are for them. And it's just testament to the possibility of past lives and the reincarnation theory. So now when I was thinking about this episode, I was looking into astrology, because that's something that I'm really curious about, that I'm really open to learning. In evolutionary astrology, it mentions that the birth chart reflects the reality of the soul here on this earth. It's like a map. And there will be archetypal overlaps in the individual's chart, but each individual will still be living out their birth chart in a very different way. And that also explains why twins, even though they're born just a few minutes after each other, astrologically the cosmos would be placed pretty much in the same position, even despite the few minutes of difference. But even then, they will still go on to lead very different lives. And I have younger sisters that are twins who are living very differently, just in different places of their lives at the moment. Now, I want to say that even looking at different cultures, like what culture you're born into, what culture you're raised in will also dictate the experience that you have and the lessons that you would need to learn. For example, if you're a female in a highly oppressive culture that say women cannot have driver's license or cannot be out in public alone, their life lessons would be very different to that of a male living in the same culture, right? And the key for me is a rhetorical one, is to know why. The purpose of that question is to take us deeper into understanding our individual circumstances and what lessons can we take away from this, whether this means you need to develop greater compassion, personal awareness, or gratitude. And of course I say all of this just tying it back into what I said earlier at the beginning, how I was like, well, no, I believe that we get born into this world to gain experience, right? So this is all kind of tying into what I kind of feel and believe in. Now, our reality here in this lifetime could be this way because maybe in countless lifetimes prior to this one, like, and I'm just likening it back to if you're a woman born into a very oppressive culture. So if that's her reality now, then maybe in countless lifetimes prior to this particular one, she could have been a male in a privileged society that had freedom and power to do as she chose as a he.
That's right.
With no limitations or no one to answer to. And so this could be the soul's journey to experience the other side of the coin.
Right.
Yeah. And so the birth chart at a glance can show you how the soul will create new circumstances for itself in order to grow and develop. And one definition of evolution is defined by Jeff Wolf Green, who is the so-called founder of evolutionary astrology and who has written many books on this topic. The definition of evolution in this process of generating new desires and exhausting old desires. So there's this kind of like forward movement of emerging new desire for a different experience and then letting go of the old. So letting go of the familiar, and the purpose and hope is that eventually all that is left is the desire to reunite with, quote unquote, the source.
I like that.
Yeah. And this is possibly the point where we cease to reincarnate. When speaking about desire being the essence of this evolutionary process, desire can be described as an elimination process, even though we are generating new desires that is expressed through the evolution of our human personality. But really, on a soul level, yeah, it's an elimination process. So I'm just going to, I will mention a couple things about a few planets here. So planetarily speaking, when we think of desire on the level of consciousness that we're all familiar with on this earthly plane, Mars is the planet that signifies our earthly desire. For example, I want
a new pair of shoes.
Yeah, I want something, insert object.
Yeah.
I desire for
a new bigger house.
Or I desire for companionship. I want to know how that feels like. Or I desire freedom. How does that look like? Now Mars, it's a faster moving planet, but it's a lower octave of Pluto. So Mars being on this lower octave of Pluto and having these earthly desires is like, the driver of desire on this earthly plane. And it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is very necessary for the soul's evolution to experience all things. And then on the other hand, we have Pluto that signifies, on a higher octave of Mars, the desirous nature of the soul itself, like what the soul is by nature, that essence that doesn't change. When we die, what remains is our vibration, our attachments or fixations, any unresolved emotional dynamics within us, as well as the extent to which we have done the deep journey within to find ourselves on, like, during this earthly experience in this particular lifespan that we have, and then we pass away. Then what we take with us are all these non-materialistic things, so I guess
The learnings.
yeah, the learnings, exactly. So whatever is left, whatever desires and external object focus remains, thus creating more human experience, that is what's going to lead us to the next experience,
Right.
in the next life. So, and there's also this concept that we evolve in themes. Now, I'm thinking of a collective here.
Right.
On the collective, there's this evolving and common themes playing out. So we can look at Pluto. It will spend 20 years in one sign. And we look at Pluto in our birth chart and understand that is where we are at with our soul's evolution. It can give us insight as to where we're at with how we're developing on a soul level. And this will give you a basic understanding of the nature of the desire reality of our soul from the past leading to this lifetime. And oftentimes you'll hear Pluto being referred, in astrology, you'll hear Pluto being referred to as the planet of quote-unquote transformation. And that's because of the archetype of the soul's desire to evolve. So, in other words, transform. So, yeah, with Pluto comes like empowerment, but also disempowerment. So there's this shadow work that you need to learn to release in this lifetime. So it's about discovering your shadow and then working on that. So you're empowered to discover the darkness within yourself, or the things that you may need to work on from past lives. You may be empowered to let go of that and liberate yourself in this lifetime of those. Or disempowerment, meaning you could get caught up in not choosing not to become enlightened, or choosing not to work on yourself and just being victim to, woe is me, I'm born into poverty, I have no means to get an education. People can get stuck in their shadow and not try to work it out for themselves. So now, just going back a little bit on that whole, when I said about Pluto taking about 20 years to change signs. So the generation born within the same zodiacal sign will tell you archetypally the themes you'll experience on a generational level, but the house and aspects is what makes the journey unique for you and only you. So you throw in these, and then you throw in different levels of consciousness, and that also shapes your perception. And this also adds to the uniqueness of your experience, despite sharing the same Pluto sign, zodiacal sign, as a whole generation of others. So you'll have Scorpio, Pluto and Scorpio. I have Pluto and Scorpio, but what house sign and what it's aspecting will look different to mine. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that evolution happens through the emotional body. It's what we take with us into in our next life. It's the continuous journey of growth. The most important thing that I would hope for you to take away from this is that we must be open to change. It is good to have a strong sense of self and identity and to know where you know who you are. But it's equally important to not be too attached to that where there's no room for change or evolution.
Makes sense.
But I know you previously talked a bit about reincarnation versus rebirth earlier on. Are you, just wondering, Ruth, are you able to go into it a little bit deeper to, I guess, to help our listeners to make sense of what these mean and the difference between the two? Because it's very subtle, and even I was thinking, what is the difference between reincarnation and rebirth until you mentioned it. But yeah, if you could just explain it a little bit more in detail, it would help immensely, even just for my own understanding.
Yes. They're two of the most common views on this topic, reincarnation and rebirth, with a very subtle difference, but definitely different. Each of these ideas stem from two different traditions. The reincarnation belief comes from the Hindu tradition, so we can start with that one. In the Hindu tradition, reincarnation is the belief that a single eternal soul or essence is reborn multiple times in different physical forms, whether it's plant, human, animal, or divine, like some Jesus,
Right.
Krishna, very divine incarnation. Karma is the accumulation of all of the actions taken by the being during the incarnation, and that collective balance of what was done or not done is what determines which paths are available for the soul to take in its next incarnation. Eventually, hopefully, the soul will achieve freedom from this cycle. If not, then it just carries on and on. So in this process, the eternal soul, or what's called the Atman, takes on a physical body through birth. The physical body lives, experiences, then passes away, and the soul moves on to a new embodied form. The soul can move from one physical form to another, or it can also spend time in the underworld or in Devaloka, which is a place where the gods and goddesses live. So sounds like heaven and hell to me. And in the end, when the soul achieves something called moksha, that's when the soul is liberated from this cycle. Hindus have a very cyclical view of the universe. It goes round and round and round. In the same way we have 4 seasons, summer, autumn, winter, spring. Everything we observe in our world is cyclical. You plant a seed, a tree grows, then the fruit falls with more seeds. The seeds grow to new trees, and the original tree eventually dies, but the new seeds and trees continue. So you have these cycles. The soul is the experiencing essence that goes through these cycles. The goal is moksha, which I mentioned, and that's liberation from earthly things. And reincarnation is simply that process of being reborn again and again. I remember before I asked you about samsara. So samsara is the name of this cycle. It's called the wheel of samsara.
Yeah.
And it goes round and round until the soul is mature. I think that is the view and understanding of reincarnation that majority of people in the Western world have. So then when you hear rebirth, you go, oh, aren't they the same thing? But the Buddhists say, no, they're not the same thing.
I definitely would have thought that.
Yes. So in the Buddhist view, rebirth is based on your actions will have an impact on what happens. That's for sure.
Okay.
And the cycle that continues on and on is also samsara. Now, this cyclical journey, in Buddhism, they call it dukkha, which means that it's a journey of pain. And it's full of suffering and unhappiness. And according to the Buddhist tradition, samsara will repeat again and again until you achieve what they call nirvana, or a state of complete liberation. And the liberation comes from having that profound insight and the cessation of craving. So understanding the fundamental nature of reality and not subscribing to the illusion is what causes it to crumble, and then it all disappears. Samsara and nirvana, this is a big foundation for this belief system. And then you have karma, which is what dictates how the rebirth works. According to the original Buddha, he also had knowledge of past lives. And so we might automatically ask, well, why don't I have knowledge of my past lives? And that's because we're not conscious. So we haven't even begun that ascension process to start waking up. But the more you become conscious and the more you are headed towards that nirvana path, you might have to continue to reincarnate as you're doing that work, as you're getting closer and closer to nirvana. But now you'll start to be so conscious that you remember your past lives. And then eventually the illusion will crumble and you'll see it for what it is. Which sounds very exciting to me. And I hope that, I don't think in this life, but in one of my future rebirths, that I would be able to see the true nature of reality as it is described in this tradition and many other traditions as well. So according to rebirth, just drilling down on the differences now, this cycle where the karma leads to a repeat of actions, it flows across 6 different realms. You have the realm of the gods, the realm of the demigods, humans, animals, ghosts, and the hell realm. Depending on what you've done, that will dictate which realm you will go to. If you have done virtuous deeds, then you will go to better realms, and that's called kushla karma. If you have had many, many ignorant actions, so it doesn't mean that anyone's punishing you, but it's just the result of the balancing of the universe, that you're ignorant, you didn't know that it was bad to do, but you did it, you're still going to have the consequences of it, and that's where you end up in the lower realms, and that's called akushla karma. So the Buddhist traditions focus on gaining merit, but also eventually reaching nirvana. And I think you have 2 different pathways, because in Buddhism there are monks that are very, very committed to reaching nirvana, but then you also have the everyday Buddhist who's having a normal life, and for them, all that they're concerned about is accruing merit for the next life, because maybe they don't want to get off the wheel of samsara. They're enjoying it, but they want it to go well. So then that's where they will do charitable acts and make donations and lead a good life and then have a good rebirth. And according to this theory, then if you are born in a very, very difficult circumstances, it could be that you've exhausted all of the merit that you needed to be born in a better circumstance. And this view completely contradicts what we are discussing about.
Right.
I want to be born in a lowly circumstance for learning. So it's very fascinating how all these different traditions have different approaches. Now, people studying Buddhism have also been quite, I guess they've also had some struggles with the idea of rebirth, because if there's rebirth, everyone goes, what is the thing that comes back? If it's not me, who is it? Because in Buddhism, they say, they have this thing, this word, anatta, or anatman, which means not that. There's the atman, which is the self, and this is not the self. So when you're born, I'm Ruth and you're Bianca. This is not that thing that we really are. And a lot of people just couldn't figure out how to rectify who is the not self and what is the thing that comes back. So the Buddhist answer is, I'm sorry, you don't get to come back. Your karma comes back. And it's just it's the karma. But the thing way, way back behind it all is the true self, or the universal soul. And you could say that it's just semantics, it's their language, but they've separated out the idea of the ego and the eternal you. There's also the Theravada tradition, and I like the way they describe it, because they say that there's a continuity of consciousness that just flows like a river, and it's that river that goes through the rebirth. So it's an endless stream that just flows and flows. So it is you, but it's not you. And in the same way, that is the thing that you are here and now, because you are not the Bianca that was a baby. You're something different. But it was you, and now you're the you of now. So that even the cycle, or the journey of birth and growth that we can observe in this world is a little snippet of what's to come. It's going to be more of the same, more of growth and becoming different, changing form, new experiences. And that's why in all of the religions, they keep emphasizing be present, because that's all we have is the now.
Yeah, I do resonate with that, because of the whole, like, even just looking back 10 years, Facebook has that, you 10 years ago, what you said, and I'm just like, oh, cringe.
Oh, I'm so glad that's not me now.
Yeah.
But it's great, because then you know that you can grow and progress, and you never have to be the same person you were.
Yeah.
A lot of people are stuck in who they were yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, things that happened 20 years ago. But when you realize that you are this endless stream of consciousness on a journey, then it frees you. You don't have to identify with the events of the past. You can learn from them and move on. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have a phrase known as bardo, and that is the interim phase between death and rebirth. So in Tibetan Buddhism, they'll have special funerary rites, and the person in this in-between period, it lasts for 49 days in this tradition, and they will do all kinds of things to try and help them so that they can be very clear on where they want to go and get the best chance of going to the best next place for their journey. I just find it fascinating. There's one final idea that I previously touched on, and I think it's worth mentioning because it's fun. So we know from the research that there's something going on here with consciousness of past lives, the memories, but the specifics of it are mapped out in different ways in many different schools of thought, and every school is quite staunch that their way is the right way. And I know we've spoken about this offline, that as soon as you see a group that is adamant that their way is the right way, I would stand back and say, hang on, no one side is the right way. There are just myriad ways to look at the same thing. So that's why I like looking at this other idea, and that's that the virginal spark starts as a pure essence, and it begins collecting experiences starting from the lowest level. So you wouldn't go from human to cat you would go upwards. You would start as some amoeba.
Though I do feel like sometimes some animals are much more smarter than us humans at times.
True. But sometimes you meet a human and I swear, I think, did you just come up from the animal kingdom in your last incarnation? Because that would explain everything. Yeah, there's no right or wrong about it, but it would just make a lot more sense. So you would start at the very lowest level in the mineral kingdom, and one of the
a plant.
Yes, well, one of the lowest levels is a rock. Now, you might think, oh my goodness, imagine if I had to be a rock for 100 years or 1,000,000 years. That would be so boring.
How do they die?
Yeah. Well, they would be there as a very, very basic consciousness. And in the same way that you think I'm happy being a human, a rock is happy to be a rock, because when it's a rock, it just knows to be a rock. So it wouldn't be sitting there trying to solve the mysteries of the universe. It would be very rock-like. It might just be sitting there going,
But you know what, actually? They can be quite profound in a way, only because I'm thinking of the crystals and the different energetic vibrations that they give off can be very healing to the human soul and very beneficial, depending on what vibration that they're emitting.
So if a crystal can help you, it's because it's conscious. And it's not unhappy going, I wish I were a human, because it knows it will.
Let's not put words into these rocks' mouths. No, I'm kidding. Jokes.
Yeah, so
just playing.
I just can't imagine what kind of consciousness you would have as a plant or as soil.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you then get upgraded through the levels of complexity, building on your experiences. So you move through the animal kingdom, and finally you end up as a human. Human is not the last level because the levels are infinite. We just can't comprehend too far away from where we are at the moment. So those Buddhas and Grand Masters, they've ascended the human level and they're going on into more levels. So by learning all you can from your experiences and finally becoming liberated from suffering, then you become a pure, powerful, blissful God. And then you continue on into more levels from that. In this idea, it says that if you are not successful in your ascension, so let's say you've been a human for far too long and you're not getting better, you're not balancing your karma, you're just staying the same, and you've been on repeat for the same cycle for a very long time. So then what happens is your consciousness starts to become more and more dense, and finally the natural cycles of the universe will wash and crush the ego and release that energy to start again. And this place where you get recycled is what all of the religions are trying to explain through a concept of hell. Now, in this idea, the essence isn't washed of the ego as a punishment, but it is done in the universal compassion of the universe to allow it freedom from its own self-created suffering when it has become too great or too dense. And then finally, in this framework, the essence is liberated and pure, but it has lost all of its experiences. So it has to start again from the mineral and animal kingdom and try to ascend and become a divine, intelligent, powerful being like an angel or God. So all of these ideas, they're very fun to play with and talk about. And everyone is entitled to their own opinion, taking what they want or don't want from them. The practical side to it is that whatever idea you connect to most, if you embrace the idea of karma, balance, conscious decision-making, and growth, then any of these frameworks can support and promote the growth of your character at its basic level. One belief can be all you need for now, and you can continue to evolve as you go along. And then when you outgrow what you used to think, you might have some insights and understandings that are personal rather than from what someone told you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like never ending.
Exactly. And then these concepts can promote your spiritual growth for the stage of your journey, for whatever stage of the journey that you're on.
Yeah, exactly. So just to sum up the things that you just mentioned about the different
traditions,
kind of reincarnation versus rebirth. So we have the Hindu belief in reincarnation, where an eternal soul is born many times. It continues a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth until it reaches a perfected state, maturity. And feel free to, like, I'm just in trying to, in my head, make sense of the things that maybe the key takeaways that I got from what you mentioned. Then we had the Buddhist belief in quote unquote rebirth, where depending on our actions, it dictates which realm we're birthed into. Is it that wheel of samsara?
That's right.
And then there's the Tibetan Buddhism that's similar to Buddhist concept of rebirth, but the difference is that there's an interim phase that you enter into once you've passed on from this life, and then there's that little phase before you re-enter.
That's right. Yes.
Into the earth realm again.
And then the final one was that you start at the bottom and you work your way up.
Rock to
from rock to human to God.
Right. and infinite other realms that we cannot perceive with our knowledge and
at the moment. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot to take in.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ideas.
There's a lot, yes. And many of our listeners can take away a lot from this episode. We shared our personal beliefs, where we stand with regards to reincarnation. It's still a learning in progress. Who knows? Once we've journeyed on through life a little bit more and our perception changes a little bit, who knows? We also shared stories of how past lives have manifested in young children. I gave an astrological lens and how we can see the soul purpose through looking at our individual birth chart. And you shared some different traditional beliefs. I think overall we can see that the life we live is paved with experiences to be had and lessons to be learnt. We have the ability to make conscious decisions that will ultimately serve our higher purpose. We would be so grateful if you would please leave a review or reach out to us if you have any questions. We will leave our contact details in the description. We hope you join us on the next episode, and remember, the path to your best reality is in your hands to create when you become conscious.